Hi, everybody. This is Michael with Bridging the Gap, one of the instructors here. Today, I am here with Stephanie Belhomme. She is one of our previous participants. Yep. And she is currently a Salesforce business analyst, and she is joining us from New Jersey. So we're going to get a little bit into her journey with the program. But first of all, we want to thank Stephanie for joining us and give her a chance to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And thank you, Michael and team at Bridging the Gap for the invitation. One slight edit, I am both a business analyst and a Salesforce admin. So I can't drop my admin cred because that was
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that had a big part of your project as well. So we definitely need to include that for sure. Awesome. So I am pretty excited to learn a little bit more about your journey, even though I know quite a bit because I was your instructor. But I also want to hear a little bit more about your story along that journey from your perspective as well. So my first question for you today is to take us back to last year and tell us about before you joined the Business Analysis Blueprint. Where were you at in your career and what were you looking to achieve by joining this program?
Sure. I would have to go back a little bit further than that to when Laura Brandenburg and Bridging the Gap sort of hit my radar. It had to be during my most major contract within a corporate environment, and it was somewhere between 2019 when I started and then late 2020 when I ended, so definitely in the midst of that or a little bit before that.
Okay.
And Laura hit my radar. I ended up watching a couple of her YouTube videos and she just stuck, right? And I just, kept following her content. So I think I signed up and would get, interesting little tips and blurbs in my email box. Some I would read, but over time, the first resonance just grew more and more the more I got to hear from her, right? And the thing
Awesome.
that
Yeah.
hit me with Laura is that she came up with a really succinct, direct way to explain that business analysis is a thing, right? It's
Yes.
a process.
Yes.
He basically brought sanity to a process, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that I also discovered during our cohort that I wasn't the only one that was sort of adhocking and learning these skills in job or in
Yeah.
process and in project, right? And when you do
Right.
that and you do that over years, like, yes, you develop strengths and weaknesses in the overall like tools and structure, right? But you without, we'll talk about this later, but without the cohesive sort of 360-degree view of all of the components, how they work together, how it fits
Yeah.
together, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So her
Yeah.
content was stuck because it was like, oh wait, I can bring a bit more sanity to the thing that I'm doing. And when you're doing it sort of neck deep or eyeball deep into a running project, it's hard.
Yeah. And when you're kind of coming into the world of business analysis, a lot of people still don't understand it. A lot of practitioners are looking for an actual framework, right? They're like, I need a BA framework. So with Laura being able to outline that 8-step business analyst process that you're referring to, it really adds a lot of clarity, right? There'll be some things that can go that might shift around a little bit, but it really gives a core type of framework for people or a guide for people to kind of go through the process and feel like they kind of have some way to navigate through this whole thing, right?
Right,
So
right,
yeah,
exactly.
I,
And to touch on that just a little bit, I ended up going full all in into the Salesforce ecosystem because of the first company that I was working at, a nonprofit that had Salesforce, and I ended up doing all of the business analysis work along with a bunch of other things. They had a bunch of IT things going on at once that I helped sort of get a handle on, right? But
wow.
I didn't realize that I was doing business analysis work until much later in my Salesforce, journey to get more experience. And then when I hit Laura's class, it was like, oh my God, I've been doing this for a long time and didn't
Yeah,
know.
that's what that's called.
Right. Before, the people I worked with didn't have names for all the stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? That's so common. I think that's one of the most one of the funnest part about being in this line of work is I love when people get that aha moment, like, oh, that's what it's called. I've been doing that, or, oh, I can start doing this and make this,
Yep.
get this result. So I think I think that's very common. And we always love to hear that part
And
for
it's
sure.
and it's funny. Last thing I'll say about it is that Laura would mention this in her videos, right? Um, but there was something that was sort of more impactful being in the cohort and in the class, that like you really got that this is a multidisciplinary, multi-sector, multi-industry skill. And she would
Mhm.
point out too, this is a high value skill, right? But
Yes.
I knew it from my Salesforce work, but then again, being in our cohort and seeing the diversity of people and practitioners, right, from all kinds of industries, like, oh, yeah, six figures, high value, like business,
Absolutely.
bottom line, return on investment, cost and savings,
Yes.
culture, all of it, right? Yeah. So I had to
Absolutely.
add that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're thankful for that, right? That's what we're here for, is to allow people to recognize that they are valuable, right? And they can, hopefully the certification program is going to allow you to command more like, yeah, this is what I'm able to do, you know, how can you help me, right? So great. That's awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the program. So you now have your ACBA. So in regards to your success with that, what are some of your key or main takeaways from the program?
Sure. Um, I think the first and biggest one was commitment, right? That was crucial and huge. And as you know, throughout this project, I stumbled upon some significant points of grief and loss, right? I
Yes.
mean, I think day one, right? So if we put this in context of the timeline, we did the summer session, which started around July and ended in December.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
I'm first generation. Both of my parents are Haitian. In July in the summer, we had the assassination of the president, right? And I still have
yeah.
family that's back at home, right? We have family all over the world, but the family that's at home, we're still connected to. So that happened. And then there was the floods and the earthquake,
Yes,
you
I
know,
remember that. Yeah.
and we're still going through, COVID deaths and things like that as well, right?
Yeah.
So throughout that 6 month
Absolutely.
period, there were these hiccups of like, I remember that first weekend and I'm like, I think I typed to you in the email, like, I submitted my first module. It was it was it was just, I want to say shameful, but in context, right? Pathetic, but in context, right? The best that I could do. And I thought, God, I want to quit before I've even started. How is this
Oh,
gonna work? Yeah.
yeah,
The
yeah.
commitment thing
But
is
you definitely pushed through. I was so proud of you for, persevering and pushing past that. I was like, I don't know if she's gonna make it, but but you did. And I thought that was absolutely awesome, because to be going through a program at this level and to be going through, the things that you were going through with your family and, other loved ones, I think that's definitely worth, noting, because that was a big big hiccup, right? So, and a lot of other people probably could have just been like, look, I just can't do this program right now, but you definitely kept pushing forward. So I'm definitely proud of you for that.
Thank you.
Very
And I have to
welcome.
say, to your credit and the credit of the team as well, you guys did an excellent job of holding space for me and giving me that gentle push. Not too hard, not too little, like whatever decision you need to make, we're here. But
Yeah.
it was really very special and very supportive, because I think any other group would have been like, well, thank you for your money. Peace out. Be well. Right?
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
guys were not that, and I could kind of feel your gunning for me, in the background.
Mhm.
You kept your poker face. I didn't know until now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it,
Yeah.
it really it really made a difference. Just the sincerity of the emails. It's not like anybody wrote me a long love letter, but it was just sort of, this is what we can do. We worked around some things, and then it was like, okay, just show up, Stephanie, just show up, and
Yeah.
that's what I would say to
Yeah.
myself, and that kind of got me through each piece. Yeah. I would say that the second thing that was sort of like neck and neck in terms of challenging was like if I go into like the modules and the components of the content, um, the 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 data dictionary was probably the most, right, that and the final module, which was the culmination of everything we had done.
Yeah.
And I
The
say that
essential.
because the final one, where even though we had covered everything else prior, right, and it was sort of the culmination and we passed with flying colors, so there's a certain relief, it was really that test of being able to sort of back yourself out of a cul-de-sac of hyper analysis, right? As an analyst, right, we like to analyze things, and you can overthink something and then make it more difficult than it needs to be. But then being able to be like, okay, let me reference the framework. Let me rethink this, right? Step back and go back and then look at it like, oh, okay, wait a minute, right? There's a simpler way, a more elegant way, a more logical way to do this. And then it was literally the test of like, can I integrate all of these pieces into this one framework? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think your perspective is actually pretty common, that a lot of people do struggle with the data modeling module the most, because that's what most business analysts are least familiar with. So yeah, definitely people struggle with that. But also the final module, right? The other three modules are much more guided. It's kind of like, this is right, this is, you know, how you do it. So it's more like, it's a little more like either you do it or you don't, or you do it correctly or incorrectly, and we give you feedback. But with that final module, we have to bring everything together. It's a lot more, you know, it's a lot more subjective. You know, it's more about you, you know, telling what you did and giving your opinions and thoughts on it. So it's like a lot, it really requires you to think in a different way, like, oh, now I have to really put it out there, right? So
and one thing that made it, I guess, I won't say easier because it was hard to do, was that as I was sort of doing the summations of each step, you know, it was really easy to see how I could be in a meeting and having to make the business case and defend this position for myself, or if I had a team, you know, or the other admins on the team, and say, hey, if we do it this way, it's going to cost us money, right? If we do it this way, it's going to cost us time. If we do it this way and find, you know, the middle ground, we might be all much happier, right? And in that process, it was really sort of, I could see those moments of those conversations, both past ones and future ones, you know?
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah, I'm glad. And that's the thing, right? We want you to be able to apply the concepts, right? It's not a theoretical course, it's an application course and application certification. So that's definitely a relief to hear you say that.
Yay. Awesome. I would say with the data dictionary, the thing that made that one hard was that I had encountered that tool before, right? Doing implementations, you often have to do that kind of thing. But the level of detail and the degree to which we really dove into the nitty gritty and needing to reconcile discrepancies in the different types and forms of data, like all of that work that happened in an Excel document before we even have a conversation with the business owners and stuff, right? That was a little, like, it made me feel a little ashamed for the past teams and projects I was on, where we just sped through that as fast as possible because of, you know, project pressures, right? We just got to get it done and move on to the next step. Like knowing really the full breadth of that and all the places that you can actually have a better cultural impact or process impact, or again, bottom line impact. Like I will definitely be taking my time in the future, just because it's like, oh, this is what it could actually, you know, do, right?
Yeah. And that's the old saying that ignorance is bliss, right? It's like now that you know what's involved, it's like, now I gotta really apply these concepts. Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. All right, so tell us a little bit about your career now. So how have you progressed? Kind of a good lead in, right? How have you progressed in your career now that you've gone through the program, now that you have your ACBA? Tell us about how that's any changes that have occurred from that.
Sure. I will say that every opportunity I get to, like, you know, use one of these tools or introduce it, I do, you know, and it's fun too. The project, the Blackstone Launchpad project at the community college where I teach, that I've helped to launch. Just this past month, we got into the nitty gritty around the reporting stuff and what that's going to look like, and what the lift, right? The labor, both the emotional labor and technical labor, will look like for our college, right? And it was interesting because then I pulled out the glossary what I made. And
Nice. Yeah, because it was an actual project that you
yeah,
were on, right?
exactly. I pulled
Yeah.
out the glossary. So my academic champion, my co-director, and then the folks who are the lead point people on the software that we're using for that project were
Mhm.
there. And I needed to make a point in terms of like, we've gotten super familiar with the software. We understand the back end and the front end and all these things. But once you pull a report, we need to know what these things mean on a screen and in these sub-memories, right? And when I
Mhm.
realized, and I only understood that because I had done the glossary for us in terms of what is it that we want to measure, what is it that we want to track,
Yeah.
what is the
Yeah.
the value, right? Both quantitative and qualitative. And I came up with this glossary for us, right, in terms of all of the things and the outcomes we want for the students. But now when you now have to match that with what's on the screen and what's already in the software that they built, I was like, okay, how much of what we want is in there already and how much is not,
Yes.
and what can we configure, right? And so
Right.
using that document I screen share, and every time I screen share, they're like, wow, Stephanie, this is so well organized. This is amazing. This is like, nectar, ambrosia from the gods.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Yes.
I was like, thank you. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, that's
good.
pretty amazing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, awesome. And so what does that mean to you personally, being able to have that type of feedback that it's like not just, okay, great job, it's kind of like they were actually impressed now, right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. One part is just pride because I know the effort that went into like understanding the tools and doing all that work, right? But then the other
Mhm.
part is just how much more like silk these conversations unfold, right, around a project, right? We're not getting caught up in either let's say the ego level of I want this and I want that and the different, parties. We're getting down
Mhm.
to just very logical, what do we need? And does the tool match what we need? And if it doesn't, then we start to have conversations about those things. So we're actually working towards solving the problems rather than getting caught up in all these other details. So it just streamlines conversations so well.
That
It's
is
fun.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. Like, I'm so happy to hear what you're telling me right now. I just, I really am. Because, like I said, we have a purpose with the program, but when we actually get to hear and see the results, we're always like super thrilled.
Mhm.
There are always some good ones, but I don't, it's just something that never gets old, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
definitely. Um, I
Awesome.
would say that on a like a larger macro level with my career, um,
Mhm.
I had continuously sort of postponed getting my Salesforce admin cert simply because, I'd be eyeballs deep in a project and then, 40 plus hours a week later, like that aspiration would just get pushed off, pushed off, pushed off, right? To the next project or in between projects and just never happened. And part of that was before I actually really wanted the cert, I wanted to have enough experience that getting the certification was then contextual, right? And experiential.
Right,
It wasn't that I was just studying and cramming for something and then it had no meaning to me, right?
right.
Um, by the time I got busy enough where like, okay, I got a bunch of experience, but then I had no time to do it. Um,
Yeah.
the business analysis piece then became the more dominant thing of like, I want to do this ASAP. Like I'll do the Salesforce admin cert anytime, but I want to do this ASAP because it directly spoke to all of that pre-prep work before you get into the admin stuff of configuring things, right? And doing all the declarative
Right.
coding and all of the work that you
Yeah.
do with the developers who do hard coding, right? Um, all of that work. So in Salesforce, there's the customer success aspect, right? And then there's business analysis, which I think is becoming more formalized now. But
Yeah.
so much of what I took away from our program with BTG is that the business analysis work encompasses both the customer success piece, as well
Hmm.
as if you happen to have technical skills, in terms of my case with the admin piece, it bridges both sides of that, right? And it's
Wow,
so
it bridged the gap.
both, right? Exactly. Um,
Wow.
and it's funny because for me, I really have found my groove in contracting. I really love it. And part of the reason I love it is because it gives me a certain amount of latitude that if I was an employee, I would be censored by either the blind spots that are entrenched or other things that are have habitual, things that are entrenched in the culture where I don't get to speak to things that come up or that I notice in a way that is fully let's say transparent or open or multi-level, right, in terms of the stakeholders. As a contractor, it's sort of like I can bring my full professionalism and my full self with always, great care and respect, obviously. But
Mhm.
there's this sense that I'm not bridled in any way, right? You're paying me as a contractor to bring my fullest and my best. And
Yeah.
the tools with BTG just let me do that much more. So I want to be able to develop my LLC and grow my business so that I can deliberately pick the projects, the clients, and the things that are most interesting to me to work on. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. That is pretty amazing. It's actually a great lead into my next question, which is kind of like the opposite of this, is that, if you hadn't invested in the Blueprint or the ACBA program, where do you think you'd be today?
Um, the Salesforce cert would definitely be, checked off the box. I'm working on that now. Finally, the
Oh,
breathing room to study. Um, and probably hopped into my next contract, treading water. Like
mhm.
there's the analogy of like, the duck on a placid lake or placid, body of water, and you just see them
Yep.
gracefully moving along the surface as if it's nothing,
Mhm.
but underneath they're paddling like hell, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would say
yeah.
that I'd be saving, because of BTG, I'm saving a bunch of calories. The paddling is
Good. Yeah.
and not so frantic, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's
without it, I would still be paddling frantically, and just
yes, yes,
keeping the facade of that grace along the water. But yeah, underneath
yes,
it all, like just wondering, like, oh my gosh.
yes. Chaos underneath, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. Great, great, great. Well, I think that that is nearing the conclusion of the questions I have to ask. And I again want to thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you want to share? Any words of encouragement for
Sure.
anyone or anything
Sure,
like
sure,
that?
sure. Um, the first thing I would say is, if you choose to do the program, right, do it eyes wide open. It's not easy by any means, but it is so worth it. It's so rewarding. And I would say that thank God it's not longer than it is.
Yeah, it's pretty long.
Right. But also thank God it's not shorter than it is. I think you guys hit the right sort of sweet spot, right? Um,
Mhm.
and so if you go in, just go in eyes wide open, and it's worth the effort, right? Don't give up. It is so worth the effort. Just both on the, I didn't realize this, I think maybe until talking to you, but the validation that comes with understanding, like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this all along, or I know this tool, I know that, right? But then
Mhm.
also the places where you had blind spots and you didn't know this other way that you could use this tool, or this whole other tool altogether that you were never introduced to, but would complement and supplement this one over here. Like all of this stuff that comes together, it's both like there's the validation part, but the I think the confidence comes from that, right? That you leave with, from like
Yeah.
being able to deliberately engage with what you know, and also improve and fill in the gaps of what you don't know, to then make your projects, your teams, and the culture of that experience so much better. Yeah. So
That's
it's,
huge. That's huge.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Wow, what a great this has been a great interview, I must
It's
admit.
fun.
So thank you for
Agreed. Same
sharing
here.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for your time. It was such an honor to speak to you today. I know your story is going to help a ton of people out there who are interested in the Blueprint or the ACBA program, but also people that are just interested in business analysis or maybe Salesforce, right? So thanks again, and we will catch you next time.
My pleasure. And
All
thank you.
right. You're very welcome. All right. So I'm